Magic is a concept used to describe a mode of rationality or way of thinking that looks to invisible forces to influence events, affect change in material conditions, or present the illusion of change. Within the Western tradition, this way of thinking is distinct from religious or scientific modes. However, such distinctions and even the definition of magic are subject to wide debate. Practices classified as magic include divination, astrology, incantations, alchemy, sorcery, spirit mediation, and necromancy. The term magic is also used colloquially in Western popular culture to refer to acts of conjuring and sleight of hand for entertainment. The purpose of magic is to acquire knowledge, power, love, or wealth, to heal or ward off illness or danger, to guarantee productivity or success in an endeavor, to cause harm to an enemy, to reveal information, to induce spiritual transformation, to trick, or to entertain. The effectiveness of magic is often determined by the condition and performance of the magician, who is thought to have access to unseen forces and special knowledge of the appropriate words and actions to manipulate those forces. Phenomena associated or confused with magic include forms of mysticism, medicine, paganism, heresy, witchcraft, shamanism, voodoo, and superstition. Magic is sometimes divided into the high magic of the intellectual elite, bordering on science, and the low magic of common folk practices. A distinction is also made between black magic, used for nefarious purposes, and white magic, ostensibly used for beneficial purposes. Although these boundaries are often unclear, magical practices have a sense of otherness because of the supernatural power that is believed to be channeled through the practitioner, who is a marginalized or stigmatized figure in some societies, and a central one in others. Foremost among the many roles magic plays are its instrumental and expressive functions. Based in the attempt to influence nature or human behavior, magic's instrumental function is measured by its efficacy in achieving the desired result. Anthropologists identify three main types of instrumental magic: the productive, the protective, and the destructive. Productive magic is employed to solicit a successful outcome from human labor or nature, such as bountiful hunt or harvest or good weather. Protective magic aims to defend an individual or community from the vagaries of nature and the evil of others. The use of amulets to ward off contagious diseases or the recitation of charms before a journey are examples of this protective function. Lastly, destructive magic, or sorcery, is intended to harm others, often is motivated by envy, and is socially disruptive. Consequently, the use of counter magic against sorcery may relieve some social tension within a community. Magic's expressive function results from the symbolic and social meanings attached to its practices. Though its performers may not necessarily be aware of this function, magic can provide a sense of group identity through shared rituals that give power or strength to members. At the same time, it can isolate the magician as a special person within or on the margins of society. Magic can also serve as a creative outlet or form of entertainment. It is, therefore, inseparable from the total system of thought, belief, and practice in a given society. The performance of magic involves words and symbolic numbers that are thought to have innate power, natural or man-made material objects, and ritual actions performed by the magician or other participants. A spell or incantation is believed to draw power from spiritual agencies to accomplish magic. Knowledge of spells or symbolic numbers is often secret, and the possessor of such knowledge can be either greatly revered or feared. In some cases, the spell is the most highly regarded component of the magical rite or ceremony. The Trobriand Islanders of Melanesia, for example, regarded using the right words in the right way as essential to the efficacy of the rite being performed. Among the Maori of New Zealand, the power of words is thought to be so important that mistakes in public recitations are believed to cause disasters for individuals or the community. Moreover, like the medieval European charms that used archaic languages and parts of the Latin liturgy, spells often employ an esoteric vocabulary that adds to the respect accorded rites. Belief in the transformative power of words is also common in many religions. Shamans, spirit mediums, and mystics, for example, repeat specific sounds or syllables to achieve an ecstatic state of contact with spiritual forces or an enlightened state of consciousness. Even modern magic for entertainment retains a residual of the spell with its use of the term abracadabra. Much anthropological literature refers to the objects used in magic as medicines, hence the popular use of the term medicine man for magician. These medicines include herbs, animal parts, gemstones, sacred objects, or props used in performance and are thought to be potent in themselves or empowered by incantations or rituals. In some cases, medicines that are intended to heal are physiologically effective. For example, the poppy is used widely as an anesthetic. Willow bark is used by some Chinese as an analgesic, and garlic and onions were used as antibiotics in medieval Europe. Other medicines that are meant to cause harm, such as toad extracts and bufadienolides, or, in fact, known poisons. Other materials have a symbolic relationship to the intended outcome, as with divination from animal parts. In scapulomancy, for example, the sheep's bone reflects the macrocosmic forces of the universe. In sorcery, a magician may employ something belonging to the intended victim, for example hair, nail parings, or a piece of clothing. As part of the ritual, the rite itself may be symbolic, as with the drawing of protective circles in which to call up spirits, the sprinkling of water on the ground to make rain, or the destruction of a wax image to harm a victim. Plants or other objects can also symbolize desired outcomes. In rites to ensure a canoe's speed, the Trobriand use light vegetable leaves to represent the ease with which the craft will glide over the water. The Zen of South Sudan place a stone in a tree fork to postpone the setting of the sun, and many Balkan peoples once swallowed gold to cure jaundice. Because magic is based on performance, ritual and the magician's knowledge and ability play a significant role in its efficacy. The performance of magic also presumes an audience, either the spiritual forces addressed, the patient client, or the community. Both the magician and the rite itself are concerned with the observance of taboos and the purification of the participant. Magicians, like priests presiding over religious rituals, observe restrictions of diet or sexual activity to demarcate the rite from ordinary and profane activities and to invest it with sanctity. Modern magicians' success with entertaining audiences is dependent primarily on their performance skills and manipulating material objects to create an illusion. The term magic cannot be defined in isolation because of its broad parameters, important role in many societies, and interactions with related phenomena. Magic is a generic label used by outsiders to describe specific practices and societies in which this word or its conceptual equivalent may not even exist. As a result, diverse phenomena are lumped together on the assumption that they operate in the same way. This artificial construct of magic also exists only in relation to what it is not primarily: religion and science as alternate modes of rationality. Such definitions of magic privilege cultures with a strong scientific orientation and stigmatize those that practice magic instead of religion. Consequently, defining magic and identifying magicians requires an understanding of the cultural context in which these labels are used. Although magic has an ambiguous relationship with Western religion and science, it is rooted in the main institutional, social, and intellectual traditions in Western history. Moreover, modern attempts to arrive at a universal definition of magic reflect a Western bias. In particular, 18th and 19th century views on cultural and historical evolution set magic apart from religion and science. In a model developed by the British anthropologist Sir James Fraser, magic is characterized as an early stage in human development, superseded first by religion and then by science. The debate over the relationship between magic, religion, and science that dominated much of the discussion about magic throughout the 20th century is evident in the fieldwork of anthropologists, the theories of sociologists of religion, and critiques by postmodernists. Consequently, research in comparative religions, history, and anthropology in the second half of the 20th century moved away from the evolutionary model toward more context-sensitive interpretations, while other studies developed new models for cross-cultural comparison. Nonetheless, the magic religion science model retains considerable interpretive power, and the dichotomies used to distinguish magic from religion or science are pervasive in popular discourse. Although magic is similar in some respects to science and technology, it approaches efficacy, which is the ability to produce a desired material outcome, differently. Magic, like religion, is concerned with invisible, non-empirical forces. Yet, like science, it also makes claims to efficacy, unlike science, which measures outcomes through empirical and experimental means. Magic invokes a symbolic cause-effect relationship. Moreover, like religion and unlike science, magic has an expressive function in addition to its instrumental function. Magical rainmaking strategies, for example, may or may not be efficacious, but they serve the expressive purpose of reinforcing the social importance of rain and farming to a community. Magic continues to be widely perceived as an archaic worldview, a form of superstition lacking the intrinsic spiritual value of religion or the rational logic of science. Religion, according to seminal anthropologist Sir Edward Bernard Tyler, involves a direct, personal relationship between humans and spiritual forces. In religion's highest form, that relationship is with a personal, conscious, omnipotent spiritual being. Magic, on the other hand, is characterized as external, impersonal, and mechanical, involving technical acts of power. Magic seeks to manipulate spiritual powers, while religious prayer supplicates spiritual forces, a distinction explored by Bronislaw Malinowski in his work on the Trobriand Islanders. Moreover, according to Emil Durkheim, religion is communal because its adherents, bound together by shared belief, form a church. Magic, on the other hand, involves no permanent ties between believers and only temporary ties between individuals and the magicians who perform services for them. The fieldwork of Radcliffe Brown among the Andaman Islanders, however, has made clear that magic, too, may have a communal dimension. The view of magic as pre-religious or non-scientific has contributed both to subtle distinctions between magic and other practices, and to the recognition of subcategories of magic. Notably, anthropologists distinguish magic from witchcraft, defining the former as the manipulation of an external power by mechanical or behavioral means to affect others, and the latter as an inherent personal quality that allows the witch to achieve the same ends. However, the line between the two is not always clear, and in some parts of the world an individual may operate in both ways. Similarly, the distinction between black magic and white magic is obscure, since both practices often use the same means and are performed by the same person. Scholars also distinguish between magic and divination, whose purpose is not to influence events but to predict or understand them. Nevertheless, the mystical power of diviners may be thought to be the same as that behind magic. Ultimately, despite these distinctions and the variety of unique roles that practitioners play in their own societies, most end up classified under the universal term magician. Often even religious figures such as priests, shamans, and prophets are identified as magicians because many of their activities include acts defined as magical by modern scholars. In the end, distinctions between magic and religion or science are harder to make in practice than in theory. Scholars therefore use labels such as magico-religious to describe activities or persons who cross this artificial dividing line. Similarly, the boundary between magic and science is permeable, since the modern scientific method, observation and experimentation, evolved from forms of scientific magic such as alchemy and astrology. Thus, the evolutionary model, which draws sharp distinctions between magic, religion, and science, cannot account for the essential similarity between various phenomena. Moreover, dichotomies that define magic in relation to other phenomena are reductionist, often ignoring the meaningful structures and beliefs that inform these practices in their native context. The claim that magic is found in all human societies rests on a definition that is rooted in Western cultural assumptions, and both these assumptions and the use of the term magic have undergone change over time and place. Consequently, to understand beliefs and practices in other societies that appear similar to European magic, it is necessary to apply the context-sensitive and comparative methods that become increasingly important in the study of anthropology, history, and religion. The root word for magic derives from the Greek term magoi, which refers to a Median tribe in Persia and their religion, Zoroastrianism. The Greco-Roman tradition held that magicians possessed arcane or secret knowledge and the ability to channel power from or through any of the polytheistic deities, spirits, or ancestors of the ancient pantheons. Indeed, many of the traditions associated with magic in the classical world derive from a fascination with ancient Middle Eastern beliefs, and are concerned with the need for counter-magic against sorcery. Spells uttered by sorcerers and addressed to gods, to fire, to salt, and to grain are recorded from Mesopotamia and Egypt. These texts also reveal the practice of necromancy, invoking the spirits of the dead, who were regarded as the last defense against evil magic. Greco-Egyptian papyruses from the 1st to the 4th century in the Common Era, for example, include magical recipes involving animals and animal substances, along with instructions for the ritual preparations necessary to ensure the efficacy of the spells. Divination took many forms, from the Etruscan art of haruspicina, that means reading entrails of animal sacrifices, to the Roman practice of augury, which is interpreting the behavior of birds, and was widely practiced as a means of determining propitious times to engage in specific activities. It often played a role in political decision-making. Ancient Roman society was particularly concerned with sorcery and counter-sorcery, contests associated with the development of competitive new urban classes whose members had to rely on their own efforts in both material and magical terms to defeat their rivals and attain success. Ambivalence toward magic carried into the early Christian era of the Roman Empire and its subsequent heirs in Europe and Byzantium. In the Gospel according to Matthew, the Magi who appeared at the birth of Jesus Christ were both Persian foreigners of Greco-Roman conception and wise astrologers. As practitioners of a foreign religion, they seemed to validate the significance of Jesus' birth. However, magus, the singular form of magi, has a negative connotation in the New Testament in the account of Simon Magus, the magician who attempted to buy the miraculous power of the disciples of Christ. In medieval European Christian legends, his story developed into a dramatic contest between true religion, with its divine miracles, and false demonic magic, with its illusions. Nonetheless, belief in the reality of occult powers and the need for Christian counter-rituals persisted. For example, in the Byzantine belief in the evil eye cast by the envious, which was thought to be demonically inspired and from which Christians needed protection through divine remedies. The Western conception of magic is rooted in the ancient Judeo-Christian and Greco-Roman heritage. The tradition took further shape in Northern Europe during the medieval and early modern period before spreading to other parts of the globe through European exploration and colonialism after the 15th century. The view of Western civilization as a story of progress includes the magic religion science paradigm that traces the rise and decline of magic and then religion, along with the final triumph of science, a model now challenged by scholars. Moreover, the very origins of the word magic raise questions about ways in which one person's religion is another person's magic, and vice versa. During the period of Europe's conversion to Christianity, magic was strongly identified with paganism. The label Christian missionaries used to demonize the religious beliefs of Celtic, Germanic, and Scandinavian peoples. Church leaders simultaneously appropriated and Christianized native practices and beliefs. For example, medicinal remedies found in monastic manuscripts combined Christian formulas and rites with Germanic folk rituals to empower natural ingredients to cure ailments caused by poisons, elf attack, demonic possession, or other invisible forces. Another Christianized practice, bibliomancy, that is divination through the random selection of a biblical text, was codified in the 11th century, the Vinatory Psalter of the Orthodox Slavs. Although co-opted and condemned by Christian leaders of this period, magic survived in a complex relationship with the dominant religion. Similar acculturation processes occurred in later conversions in Latin America and Africa, where indigenous beliefs in spiritual forces and magical practices coexist, sometimes uneasily, with Christian theology. In high medieval Europe, the battle between religion and magic occurred as the struggle against heresy, the Church's label for perverted Christian belief. Magicians, like heretics, were believed to distort or abuse Christian rites to do the devil's work. By the 15th century, belief in the reality of human pacts with the devil and the magical powers acquired through them contributed to the persecution of those accused of actually harming others with their magic. Also in the High Middle Ages, the demonization of Muslims and Jews contributed to the suspicion of the other. Marginal groups were routinely accused of ritual baby killing. In lurid accounts of the blood libel, Jews were charged with stealing Christian children for sacrifice. Similar accusations were made against witches by Christians and against Christians by the ancient Romans. Although magic was widely condemned during the Middle Ages, often for political or social reasons, the proliferation of magic formulas and books from the period indicates its widespread practice in various forms. Richard Kuykever has identified two major categories of magic. Low magic includes charm, protective amulets, and talismans. Sorcery is the misuse of medical and protective magic, divination and popular astrology, trickery, and medical magic through herbs and animals. And high, or intellectual, magic includes more learned forms of astrology, astral magic, alchemy, books of secrets, and necromancy. There is also evidence of courtly interest in magic, particularly that involving automatons and gemstones. Moreover, magic served as a literary device of the time, notably the presence of Merlin in the Arthurian romances. Although medieval European magic retained its sense of otherness by borrowing from Jewish practices and Arabic scientific sources such as the Astral Magic Manual Picatrix, it also drew from the mainstream Christian tradition. Necromancy, for example, used Latin Christian rites and formulas to compel the spirits of the dead to obey. By the late Middle Ages and into the early modern period, magic was regarded as part of a widespread and dangerously antisocial demonic cult that included the condemned practices of sorcery, necromancy, and witchcraft. Accused heretics, witches, and magicians were subject to inquisitions designed to uncover these cult connections and to destroy the means of transmission. For example, the burning of condemned books or the guilty parties. The influential Manual Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, in 1486 by Jacob Sprenger and Henry Kramer, describes witchcraft in great detail. For example, the Witches' Sabbath, a midnight assembly in fealty to the devil. Moreover, this oft-reprinted volume is responsible for the misogynist association of witchcraft with women that becomes the dominant characteristic in the early modern period. This conspiracy theory of demonic magic contributed to the early modern witch craze that occurred at a time of growing tension between magic, religion, and nascent science. Nonetheless, despite the persecution of black magic and its alleged practitioners, forms of white magic persisted in Europe on the boundaries between magic, mysticism, and emerging empiricism. During the Renaissance, there was renewed interest in ancient Middle Eastern practices, Neoplatonic mysticism, and Arabic texts on alchemy and astrology. Tycho della Mirandola sought hidden knowledge in Jewish Kabbalah, a mystical practice for unlocking the divine secrets contained in written and unwritten Hebrew scriptures. Marsilio Ficino studied astral magic and the power of music to channel cosmic influences, while Giordano Bruno explored the mystical traditions of Hermeticism, based on works of the legendary Alexandrian prophet of the 1st to the 3rd century Hermes Trismegistus. Although generally tolerated because their practices were perceived to be within the main Judaic and Christian Hermetic tradition, practitioners of alchemy were sometimes considered to be evil magicians who acquired their knowledge through a pact with the devil. When magical activities of intellectual dilettantes proved or appeared to be antisocial, the results were more often put down to simple trickery, as in the case of the 18th century Charles Alessandro, Count di Cagliostro, Giuseppe Balsamo. the European fascination with the magical traditions of the ancient Middle East was extended to those of East and South Asia when Europeans made contact with these regions in the early modern period. Orientalism, as literary and cultural critic Edward Said labeled this phenomenon, has its roots in the sense of the other found in the earliest definitions of magic and in the Renaissance penchant for Egyptian, Hebrew, and Arabic materials. Intrigued by the exotic otherness of Eastern societies, modern European philosophers experimented with the progressive model of magic science religion. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, for example, viewed 19th century India as an immature civilization, in part because Hindu consciousness lacked the categories of logic Hegel valued. A popular scientific worldview prevails in modern Western societies that suggests the triumph of human reason, Enlightenment rationalism, and the scientific revolution. Ironically rooted in Renaissance experiments in magic and motivated in part by Reformation pragmatism, led to the modern triumph of scientific reasoning over magic, evident, for example, in 19th century exposes of magic tricksters as charlatans, notably spirit rappers. Mediums who conversed with spirits who replied by knocking on a table were easily exposed as the ones doing the knocking. Modern popular magic has appeared in the realm of entertainment, generally as a plot device in stories and movies, as tricks aimed at children, and as mysterious sleight-of-hand illusions in magic shows that delight the audience's sense perceptions and challenge their reasoning ability. The fascination with occult knowledge and mystical powers derived from non-mainstream or foreign sources persist in the West in astrological charts in newspapers, theories of interplanetary aliens and government conspiracies to hide them, occult rituals in some New Age religions, and interest in traditional practices that have an esoteric flavor, such as Feng Shui, geomancy, the traditional Asian practice of aligning graves, homes, and temples with cosmic forces. This persistence suggests, in part, the impact of globalization on postmodern worldviews challenging the dominance of a strictly scientific mode of rationality. Western conceptions of magic, religion, and science were exported to other parts of the globe in the modern period by traders, conquerors, missionaries, anthropologists, and historians. European travelers from the 16th to the 19th century functioned as primitive ethnographers whose written observations are invaluable historical resources. However, their accounts, often colored by their Judeo-Christian assumptions about religion versus magic, illuminate how indigenous peoples were treated as children to be educated or, in the case of some conquerors, as subhuman races to be enslaved. During the latter part of the 19th century, anthropologists began to analyze magic and its part in the evolution of the world's religions. Their work was characterized by a fundamental distinction rooted in the magic-religion science evolutionary model. The world is divided between historical, literate urbanized cultures, or civilizations, for example, the ancient traditions of East and South Asia, and non-literate, tribal archaic, or primitive societies, such as those found in parts of Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. Historians viewed complex societies characterized by urbanization, centralization, and written traditions as more advanced and measured their progress as civilizations according to the evolutionary model. Nomadic, tribal, agricultural, or non-urbanized societies with strong oral traditions were often perceived by early European observers as developmentally stagnant people without history. While these views are no longer accepted, their residual effect is still felt in the way magic, religion, and science are conceptualized. Anthropologists of religion traditionally distinguished between the religion practiced by the world's main faith, which often marginalize magic as superstition, and the beliefs of small non-literate societies in which magic may in fact be central to religious belief. Here the distinction between religion and magic seems unfounded. Indeed, as some post-colonial societies endeavor to distance themselves from Western logic, ancient religious traditions are pivotal to the reassertion of cultural identity and autonomy. West African Vodun, which spread to the Caribbean, the Americas, and elsewhere, is one example of an indigenous religious practice that is tied to cultural identity in art, music, and literature and used subversively as a rallying point for post-colonial resistance to Western modes of rationality. The Western concept of magic is a set of beliefs, values, and practices that are not fully religious or scientific does not find its equivalent in non-Western languages and cultures. Conversely, concepts found in other cultures may be untranslatable into English or a Western framework. For example, Hawaiian historian David Malo, discussing Christianity and traditional Hawaiian religion, found amana, to make, to do, or to imbue with supernatural, divine, or miraculous power, the closest translation for English religion, contrary to its characterization by Westerners as a magical component in Polynesian beliefs. Furthermore, a modern Japanese dictionary uses a transliteration, magiku, for the English word magic. It also uses the English word magic to translate several Japanese words beginning with ma, the kanji character representing a vengeful spirit of the dead. In East Asian folk belief, an ancestor not cared for properly. In Buddhist cosmology, an evil demonic figure, while superficially similar to the Christian notion of magic as demonic. The cosmologies regarding these demons differ significantly. Moreover, Ma does not have the range of meanings that magic has in Western thought. On the other hand, specific practices identified as magic such as divination, spells, and spirit mediation are found worldwide, even if the word magic is not. For example, in China, various practices such as divination through oracle bones, offerings to dead ancestors, and feng shui can be classified as either magic, religion, or science, but it is questionable whether these categories have any validity in Chinese thought. Rather, these so-called magical practices are an intrinsic part of the worldviews expressed in China's main religious and philosophical systems, such as ancestor worship, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. In modern China, some communities deal with crisis by combining seemingly contradictory practices including supplication and coercion of gods, appeals to ancestral spirits, folk cures, and modern inoculations. Such syncretism has been common in East Asia. Notably, in 6th century Japan, the native nature worship of Shinto blended with imported forms of Buddhism without the kind of conflict that occurred during the conversion of Europe to Christianity. In modern East Asia, conflict between magic, religion, and science introduced by Western concepts of magic occurs alongside a strong tradition of syncretism that blends empirical science with practices that Westerners often perceive as unscientific magic or religious superstition. Asian religious traditions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism teach that material life is illusory. This mode of rationality focuses on understanding the principles and spiritual forces that lie behind physical experience. Consequently, adepts in these traditions who have achieved a level of understanding of these cosmic forces often appear to have the ability to manipulate physical reality in ways that seem magical. The point of demonstrations by street magicians and snake charmers in India is to show the illusory quality of material reality in order to draw attention to the universal, timeless, and cosmic. Purposeful deception in magic is thus used to illustrate the deceptiveness of human apprehensions of reality. The mystical component of magic is also clear in Tantra and other esoteric and nonconformist sects of Hinduism or Buddhism, which use mystical words, symbols, and diagrams in their rituals. Whether these practices are magic or religion depends upon one's point of view. Anthropological and sociological studies of modern non-literate societies in the Americas, Oceania, and Africa have given rise to new global terminology. Beginning in the second half of the 20th century, some sociologists and anthropologists turned the tables on earlier scholarship by applying the methods used for examining extant non-literate primitive societies to literate, urban societies of the past, which previously had been evaluated by the criteria reserved for the study of civilizations. For example, the phenomenon of shamanism and the word shaman, as defined by Mircea Eliade in his exploration of ecstatic states, has been applied not only to primitive cultures but to pre-modern Christian Europe. Likewise, the term monopower, appropriated for Melanesian and Polynesian cultures by Emile Durkheim and Marcel Mauss, has been widely applied to magical practices in historical civilizations, including that of classical Rome. because of the impact of anthropological theory on the study of magic. Its development and history bear reviewing. The first important figure in this line of inquiry was Sir Edward Bernard Tyler, whose Primitive Culture in 1871 regarded magic as a pseudoscience in which the savage postulated a direct cause-effect relationship between the magical act and the desired outcome. Tyler regarded magic as one of the most pernicious delusions that ever vexed mankind, but he did not approach it as superstition or heresy. Instead, he studied it as a phenomenon based on the symbolic principle of magic, a scheme of thought founded on a rational process of analogy. He also realized that magic and religion are parts of a total system of thought. Although he believed that magic and animistic beliefs became less prevalent in the later stages of history, he did not view magic and religion as alternative stages in the evolutionary development of mankind. That conclusion would be left for Sir James Frazer in The Golden Bough, in which he ordered magic, religion, and science in a grandiose evolutionary scheme. Magic preceded religion because, according to Frazer, the former was logically more simple. This notion, however, was based on his erroneous assumption that the Australian Aborigines, examples of a primitive people, believed in magic but not in religion. These anthropological and sociological approaches focused on magic as a social phenomenon, but the role of individual psychology was implicit in the views of Tyler and Frazer and brought out more in the work of Malinowski, who frequently offered psychological explanations for belief in magic. Sigmund Freud's influential view of magic as the earliest phase in the development of religious thought followed Frazer's model, and posited an essential similarity between the thought of children, neurotics, and savages. According to Freud, all three assumed that wish or intention led automatically to the fulfillment of the desired end. This reductionist view, based on outmoded notions about primitive cultures, was revised as the result of new field research. Although Claude Lévi-Strauss also initially equated these three groups, he later modified this view in his analysis of the work of Mauss, which focuses on the structural linguistics of terms such as mana that are deployed in the study of magic. His work, therefore, laid the foundation for later deconstructions of the concept of magic. Another line of theorists, including sociologists Durkheim and Mauss, widened the discussion by defining magic in terms of its social function. In The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life in 1912, Durkheim argued that magical rites involved the manipulation of sacred objects by the magician on behalf of individual clients. The socially cohesive significance of religious rites proper was therefore largely lacking. Durkheim's views were furthered by Radcliffe Brown and the Andaman Islanders in 1922, and to a lesser extent by Malinowski and Argonauts of the Western Pacific in 1922 and Magic, Science and Religion in 1925. Radcliffe Brown posited that the function of magic was to express the social importance of the desired event, while Malinowski regarded magic as directly and essentially concerned with the psychological needs of the individual. Subsequent studies of the working of systems of magic, especially in Africa and Oceania, built upon the work of Malinowski and Radcliffe Brown along with that of Sir Edward Evans Pritchard in Witchcraft, Oracles and Magic Among the Asen in 1937. In his seminal book, Evans Pritchard demonstrated that magic is an integral part of religion and culture used to explain events that cannot otherwise be understood or controlled. The Zand of South Sudan accept magic, together with witchcraft and oracles, as a normal part of nature and society. These phenomena form a closed logical system, each part of which buttresses the other and provides a rational system of causation. The rise of the study of comparative religion led to new theories that accounted for both world religions and localized belief systems. The work of Aleid, including his study of shamanism, is an important and influential example of this approach, as is that of Ninian Smart, who devised a seven-dimensional, experiential, mythic, doctrinal, ethical, ritual, social, and material worldview analysis for cross-cultural comparison that can be applied to different belief systems, whether called magic or religion. Likewise, Judaic scholar Jacob Neusner suggested the neutral rubric modes of rationality to avoid pejorative comparisons between systems of thought otherwise classified as magic, religion, science, or philosophy. The broader base established by the comparative religions approach avoids the difficulties of distinguishing urban literate from non-urban non-literate societies, and the perils of the magic religion science progression. Postmodern scholarship continues to challenge older anthropological notions. The work of such anthropologists as Victor Turner, Clifford Geertz, and Marshall Solons has had a wide impact on the social sciences and humanities. Central to the challenge to the traditional magic religion science paradigm was magic, science, religion, and the scope of rationality in 1990, in which Stanley J. Rajatambaya deconstructs the European history of the progress model and the work of anthropologists from Tyler forward. Other anthropologists have questioned the model of the rise and decline of magic in European thought articulated in Keith Thomas's groundbreaking Religion and the Decline of Magic in 1971, a study of early modern England, and Valerie Flint's The Rise of Magic in Early Medieval Europe in 1991. Notably, anthropologist Hildred Geertz challenged Thomas's universalized conceptions of religion and magic, and scholars have questioned the rise and fall model by suggesting that the terminology is culture-specific and the historical circumstances much more complex than the simple pattern presented. These cross-disciplinary debates, along with the rejection of the Western magic religion science paradigm, have contributed to more sensitive treatments of magical practices in diverse societies. The study of magic is a distinct cultural phenomenon and has a long history in anthropological, sociological, and historical studies. Although some distinctions between magic and other religious or scientific activities may be useful, magic cannot be studied in isolation as it once was. Practices classified as magic represent essentially an aspect or reflection of the worldview held by a particular people at a particular point in their own historical development. Magic, like religion and science, is thus a part of a culture's total worldview. Here we have reached the end of this video. We hope you liked it. Please don't forget to support us by subscribing and liking the video so that we can continue to publish more. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.